The Netflix documentary In the Name of God, A Holy Betrayal is a series produced by Korean broadcaster MBC. MBC, which was attacked and had a broadcasting ban request lodged against it for its coverage of the cults, took some 2 years to produce this original documentary, an 8-part series that highlights the representative cults in Korea. Today we will take a deeper look into the JMS cult. JMS, which is led by Chong Myungsok, applied for an injunction to ban the broadcast on February 24th. But it was dismissed on March 2nd, and it aired on schedule the following day. But who is Chong Myungsok, the leader of JMS? Born on March 16, 1945 in Kumsan County in North Jeolla Province, Chong Myungsok, now 77 years old, is the leader of the Christian Gospel Mission, also known as JMS. He is an international sex offender and is known to be currently wearing an electronic anklet. Born to father Chong Pal-sung and mother Hwang Gil-ye as the third son, Chong Myungsok had 5 brothers and 1 sister. Living deep in the mountains, Chong Myungsok only graduated from elementary school. He started attending Sunday school after he heard from some guy, "The end of the world is here. Believe in God." He studied the Bible diligently so that he wouldn't be ignored. But where did he go wrong from such a young age? He started to interpret the Bible in his own way. Based on his interpretation of Bible theory, Chong set up his first church in Namgajadong on June 1st, 1978, but was soon expelled. In his early days, Chong's church was called the Etcheon Church. During those gloomy times, this church targeted university missionary organization members such as SBF, IVF, CCC, and UBF, as well as university activists, and shared Chong's Bible theory with them. But this church was declared a cult by most Protestant denominations in Korea. His teachings were based on 30 lessons that form a numerological interpretation that identifies Chong as the second coming of Christ. Chong's church teaches that sins could be undone by having sex with Chong as a purification rite. Members of JMS say they stand for Jesus Morning Star or Jesus Messiah Savior, but actually JMS are the initials of its leader Chong Myungsok. Chong told other believers that they not only need to love God with their mind, but also be willing to give up their genitals. The sex scandal surrounding JMS President Chong Myungsok and terrorist acts carried out on its leaders make for the most unprecedented cult scandals in Korean history. Chong Myungsok attempted to make bodily contact with female believers by telling them that he would look after their health. He told them he would see if they had cysts and approach them in that way. He is said to have molested these women, no matter if people were around or not. There were testimonies that he touched breasts and buttocks as if he was examining them, and even stuck his fingers into the genitals of women, telling them he was looking for cysts in their uterus. Women who refused and left the church were watched by other members and were forbidden to talk, while women who accepted Chong's actions were sexually molested and raped under the guise of it being a divine blessing. According to a tell-all, JMS had a group of women who were at his disposal from the very beginning. Chong preferred women who were young and pretty, taller than 170 centimeters, had good skin, and little body hair. Knowing this, female believers and church officials rounded up such women, and they were presented to him as sexual gifts. They even waited for tall and pretty girls in front of girls' high schools and women's universities. They eased the minds of these girls by having them practice walking at a modeling academy. Then, under the guise of saying they were going to study the Bible, the women were brainwashed and they were told that Chong Myungsok was the Messiah. These women were then interviewed by who they thought was the Messiah, raped, and then taken care of by Chong until they were 27. JMS also turned these women into enablers, creating a vicious cycle where victims were now perpetrators themselves, facilitating his plan. Chong Myungsok was a pervert who was attached to female genitalia. He liked to fiddle with the victims' genitals and make jokes about it. Chong Myungsok claimed that he was the Messiah and said, "God has granted me all the women in the world, and if they refuse, they will be in big trouble." He then forcibly molested women and habitually teased them. Chong Myungsok called upon female believers and had sex with them in a perverse way, as well as habitually engaged in promiscuous behavior at his accommodations. He is also said to have engaged in promiscuous sexual relations with numerous women all at once on many occasions. JMS was at its prime when it was at the Nakseongdae Seoul Church in 1990. In March 1999, when JMS had 100,000 believers, the church appeared on SBS's Unanswered Questions. After the report was aired, more than half of JMS believers broke away. After details about JMS leader Chong Myungsok claiming he was the Messiah and using that to engage in sexual relations with many female believers was aired on TV, he started to receive sexual molestation accusations from former female believers. 4 former JMS female believers sued for 1.3 billion won in damages. Disgraced, Chong Myungsok fled to Taiwan in 1999. At the time, sex crimes were offenses subject to complaints, and so the statute of limitations was 6 months. He probably fled to buy time. Accusations continued to pile on while Chong Myungsok was fleeing. In 2003 and 2006, female believers said they were victims of either rape or sexual harassment. While on the run in 2003, Chong was detained by the immigration office in Hong Kong for unlawful stay. He paid a bail of $100,000 and smuggled himself into China. Chong Myungsok was an international criminal accused of multiple offenses. In January 2004, he was added to a Red Notice list. Despite this, Chong Myungsok lived freely in China for about 3 years. In 2006, a news report that Chong raped some 100 female believers from prestigious Japanese universities over the years shook the nation. What was worse was in April 2006, 2 Chinese female believers of JMS reported to public security that they were victims of rape by Chong. But he was protected by public security. When he was on the run in China, Chong Myungsok stayed in the city of Anshan, the hometown of local deacon Cho Young-ho. Chong threw large sums of money at local government officials and was able to maintain a close relationship with high-ranking Chinese officials. JMS believers proposed an investment to the government of 80 billion yuan, justifying it as tourism development for Anshan City. This is how the believers supported Chong when he was on the run. In 2007, the church is said to have made local investments totaling billions of won. But on May 16, 2007, Chong was arrested by Chinese public security authorities and not local Anshan authorities. The charges against Chong Myungsok in China were unlawful stay, violation of the Passport Management Act, illegal religious assembly, violating the ban on religious activities, the smuggling of foreign currencies, and raping and molesting Chinese women. On February 20th, 2008, after 8 years on the run, Chong Myungsok was handed over to Korean authorities under heavy security consisting of some 700 guards, the largest security presence since the opening of Incheon Airport. There were some 1,300 JMS believers as well as the victims' families that day gathered at the airport. Chong Myungsok was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2009 on charges of rape. He was released from Daejeon prison on February 18, 2018, wearing an electric anklet. Letters from Chong Myungsok when he was behind bars, which were revealed by former believers, showed how perverted and twisted he was.
My head leader was telling me to write to him like he was my husband or like he was my lover. So he'd say things like, my white skin arouses him.
After he was released from prison, Chong went to JMS's sacred place and headquarters, Walmyeongdong. But he was again accused of sexual violence, this time 22 counts of sexual violence, including quasi-raping foreign female believers in their 20s on 17 different occasions at a training center in Kumsan, South Chungcheong Province. And in October 2022, he was arrested and charged. This is when transcript evidence and disclosures by victims began to pour in. Maple, a Hong Kong and British citizen of Chinese descent who was born in 1994, came forward with her story. She testified that from when Chong Myungsok was released in February 2018 to the winter of 2021, she was raped 15 times. Maple said that when she was a high school student, she was approached and lured by many members of Chong Myungsok's faction. Since they were soft-spoken and talkative, they were able to manipulate her and many of her peers. Maple has been brainwashed, believing that she is a bride with a mission to serve groom Chong Myungsok. Now, why was this Korean cult documentary released by Netflix? Cho Sang-hyun of MBC's PD Notebook, which produced this documentary, appeared on an MBC radio talk show on March 7th and explained the reason behind them joining hands with Netflix. He said they were worried MBC would be attacked by JMS, and so they requested a partnership with Netflix. Joe said he received many threats and was followed for some 2 years while producing the documentary. He said that for the first time in his 15-year program director career, he carried a self-defense stick in his car, as well as a stun gun. He said JMS sent text messages to victims during the filming of the documentary, adding their threats were mind-boggling. This showed that the victims were constantly watched by JMS. As expected, JMS requested an injunction to ban the showing of the documentary through Netflix, only in Korea. They couldn't apply for one in the United States, where Netflix is headquartered. The MBC documentary team wanted to block intervention by JMS believers as much as they could. The reason Chong Myungsok was able to be on the run for 8 years and sent to prison and released after serving just 10 years was because of help from JMS believers. At the time, National Intelligence Service agents and prosecutors were JMS believers, and they systematically leaked investigation secrets. These prosecutors have now been dismissed. But there are still said to be believers who hold important posts. This shows that it's harder than expected to perfectly convict someone like Chong Myungsok here in Korea. JMS believers are spread out to this day at a number of universities, including Seoul National University, Yonsei University, Korea University, and Ewha Women's University. This is despite all of the crimes committed by Chong Myungsok. There are many believers who have repented and left the group. Kim Do-hyung, who entered JMS in 1995, said he didn't believe Chong Myungsok sexually molested female believers. But then he read a sentencing statement that showed Chong was accused of fraud and adultery in 1987, and the victim and Chong reached a deal, causing the charges to be dropped. Kim was then assaulted by Chong's security personnel, and then became JMS's biggest enemy. Kim, the head of the anti-JMS organization Exodus, which reported on JMS and unanswered questions, explained in his autobiographical essay, Forgotten Season, his most frightening experience. He wrote that his father was the victim of a terrorist act by JMS, and when he was admitted into the hospital's doctor was a JMS believer. Kim now says that elites from the 1980s are accomplices in Chong Myungsok's scandals. JMS continues to do its best to protect Chong Myungsok. Chong's court documents are hidden from believers so that they will not leave the church like Kim Do-young. But the unveiling of this Netflix documentary in 241 languages shared this cult to the world. Chong Myungsok was imprisoned on October 4th, 2022. Until now, some 100 people have come forward with sex-related disclosures. There are teens among them. JMS has employed a star-studded counsel from multiple law firms. They have denied all charges of brainwashing and adultery. It's making a frantic last-ditch effort to protect its 77-year-old leader. Believers continue to compare Chong Myungsok to Jesus, believing that he is being suppressed. This is how scary religion can be. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.